Hello everybody and welcome to the Jack Disney Show where I talk about everything film, comics, and of course Disney. I'm your host Jack Disney, and man oh man am I so excited because today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett. With the release of the finale, the show is finally done, and that means I can finally give my full in-depth review of the Book of Boba Fett. Now, this will be a full spoiler discussion, so if you have not seen the Book of Boba Fett and you care about spoilers, go watch it and then come back to this video later. I'm going to start off by just giving a bit of background on my history of Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Empire Strikes Back is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I even really enjoy the prequels. I think they're great, and that initial 6-movie story that George Lucas masterfully crafted, I think is just phenomenal. And then you got the Clone Wars cartoon, which is great. And then Disney bought Star Wars. But overall, I've been a little disappointed with Disney Star Wars. Except for Rogue One. That was a great movie. Until The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian definitely won me back over with Disney Star Wars. I really loved The Mandalorian and how it was like a Western, similar to what George Lucas based the original films off of. Of course, the original Star Wars is an amalgamation of several different stories. You got a lot of Dune influences in there, some Searchers, Western, and my all-time favorite, starring John Wayne. Some typical fairy tale fantasy kind of stuff in there, mixed with like samurai films. So Star Wars is definitely an amalgam of a lot of things. And Mandalorian decided to take one of those things and hyper-focus on it. And I really thought that was a bold and really unique choice. And I just loved The Mandalorian, especially Season 1. I thought it was phenomenal. And I loved Mando himself, partially because Boba Fett is one of my favorite characters. And they basically took everything great about Boba Fett and gave it to Mando. And that made him a great character. Of course, he also had his relationship with Grogu, Baby Yoda. And then there was Season 2. Of course, it brought back my man, Boba Fett. And that was just such an awesome introductory episode. And with that post-credits scene tease at the end of Mando Season 2, that we're getting a Boba Fett series, man, I was hyped. I love Boba Fett, and I've been waiting to see him in action for a long, long time. Because if you remember, he doesn't do a whole lot in those original 3 movies. And then we see Jango Fett, his father, do a lot. And I love all that stuff. But I really wanted some Boba Fett action. Like in the great comics and video games and books with Boba Fett. And I was very excited for the show. Question is, did it deliver? I would say, yeah, this show did deliver on that to a certain extent. I'll talk about that in a bit. But overall, I really enjoyed this show. It was a great show. Great character study for Boba Fett. And even though I do have some issues with it, which I'll nitpick later on in this video, this show is just so good, and I'm so happy that this show exists, that we have this 6-hour, however long it was, show about Boba Fett, even though I'm sure probably 3 hours of that aren't even Boba Fett. But the bits of Boba Fett that we got in this show were so good. Initially, I was not on board. I called into Rebel Force Radio, this legendary Star Wars podcast. They've been around for a good while. And I called into one of their shows saying, like, I just didn't really like how they were portraying Boba Fett. And then, they kind of convinced me, it's not all that bad. And then just as the show continued, it got a lot better. And I realized what arc the character is going on. How it's like this older Boba Fett who just wants to settle down. Like his father, Jango Fett, said, he's just a simple man trying to make his way in the universe. And this show sort of reflects that to some extent. And it's like, look, Bo's tired, man, and he's seen a lot, and he just wants to, kind of settle down a little bit. Doesn't want to keep doing this corrupt bounty hunter stuff. He wants to kind of go straight a little bit, make up for some mistakes he has made in the past, and we see a more heroic side of Boba Fett. I think by the end of the show, you can't call him a villain anymore. Like, Boba Fett's just a full-on hero, not even really an anti-hero. Boba Fett's just a hero at the end of this show. And I think that's a fascinating arc, and while it's not what I would have chosen, if someone asked me, what would you do for a Boba Fett series? But I'm glad they did it. I think it's very interesting. And quite honestly, the Boba Fett show I would have wanted, we've already got with The Mandalorian. So when you take everything Boba and give it to Mando, what's left for Boba? Well, the natural extension is, let's see Boba Fett after his prime. What happens to him then? And I think the idea that the show decided to delve into that is really fascinating to me. And of course, Temuera Morrison's performance as Boba Fett, just like his performance with Jango and the clones in the past, it's just phenomenal here. And I really liked his performance. I wish he had maybe talked a little less and kept the helmet on a little more. Nothing against Tim. Tim even said this in an interview. But it would have felt a bit more like Boba Fett had they done that. But overall, I didn't hate it. I really loved Temuera Morrison's performance as Boba Fett. And overall, setting the character aside, let's talk about the show itself. Episodes. So let's start off with the first couple of episodes. I really loved both of these episodes. A lot of people were like, man, this is slow. This show's off to a bad start. Boba Fett's boring. No, I loved these two episodes. I really loved the flashback stuff especially. I was a little like, okay, the modern day stuff's interesting, but we've only seen like 20 minutes of it. Not much has happened. So I wasn't as invested in that side of things until later in the show. And especially that action scene in episode 1 I thought was pretty clunky. It wasn't near as cool as Boba Fett's action scene in The Mandalorian, which was the same director, Robert Rodriguez. And I just was like, come on, dude, you're surrounded by force fields. Use your jetpack. I thought that was kind of boring. But then the flashback stuff in episode 1 was phenomenal. Just a lot of like great acting from Temuera Morrison, who didn't really talk much. And you just get this great visual experience seeing the Tuskens enslave Boba, and then they take him in as one of their own throughout those first 2 episodes. All of that stuff was really good to where at first I'm like, why wouldn't you just make this into a movie? Of course, the show gets better as it goes on in terms of the present day storyline. But man, I love those flashbacks. And then it was so heartbreaking in episode 3 when Boba goes back and sees they're all dead. Oh, that really hit me. And it especially reminded me of the scene in episode 2 where Anakin slaughters the Tusken. How both this show and previous season of Mando really humanized the Tusken Raiders. And I really enjoyed that aspect of this. So all that stuff was great. No negatives there. That part of the show was phenomenal. Meanwhile, you got this present day storyline where you have Boba Fett being the Godfather, and this is very much inspired by those Godfather films. And I did think that stuff was really cool, especially, and this is skipping forward, but the scene in the last episode where like all the crime bosses are turning, I really enjoyed that sequence, even though there was some stuff that didn't make sense. Just the realization of like, oh, it felt really cool. But anyways, back on track. We have this storyline where there's someone after Boba Fett, and we're trying to figure out who. You think it's these Hutts, and I liked seeing the Hutts in this. No, you think it's the mayor. No, it's not the mayor. And then it turns out that it's actually the Pikes. And the Pikes are introduced in the flashback. Boba was doing dealings with them in the flashbacks. And I like seeing the Pikes here as a Clone Wars callback, as a Solo callback. But there was a cool little moment where you see this gang terrorizing this random couple. And you realize, oh, that random couple, it was Cammy and Fixer, who were in deleted scenes of the original Star Wars films as Luke's friends. So I love seeing that as like a really deep-cut Star Wars reference. It was really cool. It was really cool making the deleted scenes canon and whatnot from the original Star Wars film. So that was really cool. But anyways, back to the main story. We also have Fennec Shand, who's a really cool character, Boba Fett's sidekick throughout all this. And so I grew to enjoy the present-day storyline quite a bit more and became pretty invested in the mystery of like, okay, what's going on here? Now, episode 3 is when I started to kind of lose my interest a bit. Episode 3, I did not like. I really did not like this episode, other than the flashback stuff. The flashback stuff was great in episode 3. But then you get these mod characters showing up that I was not a big fan of. These punk cyborg teenagers, they felt very strange and out of place. And then they have these laughably bad Power Ranger Vespas. Like, what was up with that? So that was very strange. I did not like that at all. And then you had that horrible chase sequence where I'm like, okay, this is definitely from the director of Spy Kids, Robert Rodriguez. It was bad. That whole sequence was bad. Very bad. But then the show did get better. Episode 4, I really enjoyed. 4 ends with Boba saying, "We're gonna need some muscle." As you hear the Mando music kicked in, and I'm like, oh man, I'm hyped. Let's go. Mandalorian crossover, baby. and then Mando shows up in episode 5. It's like, whoa! And you get one of the coolest fight scenes in any Mandalorian episode. In that beginning part where Mando's just brutally beating all these guys. He pulls out the Darksaber, chops the dude in half. It was so cool. And then you get a lot of Mando stuff. I loved all the lore that was dropped on him from the Armorer, where you see the Night of a Thousand Tears and you learn all this interesting backstory about the Mandalorians. I thought all that was really, really cool. And then you see that he misses baby Grogu. He wants to see Grogu again. And I thought that was really interesting. And then he goes to Tatooine. We see Pelimoto again. And I did appreciate the scenes with her and Mando together. May have gone on a little long with them building the ship, but I did really enjoy that stuff. And then you get to the end of the episode, and Fennec Shand shows up and reminds you, oh, right, this show's about Boba Fett. And she recruits Mando. I'm like, all right, great. We got this side episode that was setting up Mando Season 3 and where the character's going to go there. And he ends it by saying, I need to go get a friend. But I'm like, okay, obviously that's set up for Mando Season 3 because he's going to like get distracted and he'll have to help out Boba Fett. And then we get to Episode 6, the penultimate episode, the episode right before the end of this whole thing. And once again, Boba Fett's not really in it much. That's a very strange choice. One episode, that's fine. But when you have 2 full episodes leading into the finale, where Boba's not in it at all, it's very strange to me. Very, very strange. Now, Episode 6 was one of the stronger episodes. There was some great stuff in Episode 6. And I think if it was just an episode of a Star Wars show, it just as a Star Wars episode, Episode 6 was great. One of the best episodes of anything Star Wars ever. As a Boba Fett episode, not so great. You had some great moments in there. So you start off the reintroduction of Cobb Vanth. I love Cobb Vanth because he makes me think of like a John Wayne type Western character, the Marshal. And I really like that character. And seeing him again put a smile on my face, I was instantly excited. And then near the end of the episode, you get Cad Bane showing up. And it's like, whoa, first off, Cad Bane's still alive. How cool is that? And then second, it's like, okay, Cad Bane and Boba are about to meet up. And that's awesome, especially if you know your Star Wars. Because in the Clone Wars show, we revealed that Cad Bane was trained by Jango Fett. And they had a mentor-mentee relationship. And then there was a deleted Clone Wars episode, or a Clone Wars episode, rather, that was never fully finished. You can find clips of it online, but it was never released. And it was going to be based on The Searchers, again, my favorite film of all time. It was going to be young Boba Fett, who's a big part of the Clone Wars show, being trained by Cad Bane and going on this journey. And it would have ended with this epic showdown that you can find on YouTube, where it's a classic Western showdown, and they both shoot each other at the same time. Cad Bane gets shot in the head, and it causes him to, when he shows up in Bad Batch and in this show, he has a metal plate on his head. And then he shoots Boba Fett, and that's why Boba Fett has the dent on his helmet. And it's such a cool scene. And so seeing them semi-acknowledge it in this was really cool, and that got me really excited. Although, I did think it was strange, like, okay, if you're building up to this, why wouldn't you release that Clone Wars episode as part of the Season 7 they did last year, where they took unfinished episodes and reanimated them? Why wasn't this a part of that? I don't understand. I think they should animate this and release this as some sort of special on Disney Plus, because I feel like it's a really important piece of the Boba Fett story that we're missing here. But that was so cool seeing Cad Bane in live action. He's one of my favorite bounty hunters, and I just loved seeing him in this episode. That was so, so cool to me. And then, of course, she shoots Cobb Vanth. It's like, oh no! And that stuff was great. Meanwhile, you got Boba Fett, again, doing nothing. And then meanwhile to that, you got all the Mandalorian stuff. This felt like another episode of The Mandalorian. And you have Mando going to see Grogu. And it was really cool. Don't get me wrong. I loved all this stuff. You got Mando going to this forest planet where Luke is training Grogu. And we get to see Luke training Grogu. How cool is that? Just Luke training anyone. And he looked really good, too. The special effects, I like them in Mando, but they were very, stoic and everything. They looked a lot better in this, to where I'm like, okay, I could see maybe 2 or 3 years from now a full movie or a full series of this Luke Skywalker. I would love if they could do that with Luke, and then you maybe get the actor who played Han Solo in the Solo film, get him in here, and in Leia from Rogue One, get her in here. And that would be really cool to me if they could pull that off. We get to see Luke training Grogu, which was by far the highlight of that episode, at least as a Star Wars fan. It was so, so cool. And then Mando's there. We see R2 again. And then Ahsoka shows up, which was strange to me because I'm like, what was the purpose of Ahsoka being here? I'm sure it was probably just to save money because, like, you can't have Luke doing too much. And it felt like Luke should have been there talking to Mando, but they're like, we can't afford that, so get Ahsoka in. And I loved seeing Ahsoka and Luke together, and the references to Anakin. That stuff just made me smile so much. And I really loved all that stuff until we get Grogu is offered a choice by Luke Skywalker, who says that Jedi can't have attachments. And I was thinking, wait a minute. Of course, that attachment led to Luke being born. Like, Luke, buddy, you're the result of a Jedi's attachment, okay? So don't be coming in here saying Jedis can't have attachments, buddy. What would you call Han and Leia? You seem pretty attached to Han and Leia, and that Vader guy, you seem pretty attached to him too. So I didn't love how Luke was like, you can't have any attachments. I didn't love that, especially considering in the Legends books, Luke gets married and has a kid. That's pretty attached, if you ask me. But regardless, that was very much a minor part. But it really got on my nerves a bit. But I did love the shot of, like, him saying you have a choice, and you have the Mando armor, and then you have the Yoda's lightsaber. And Grogu has to make that choice. I'm like, okay, this was great. I don't want to see that choice until Mandalorian. Because what does that have to do with Boba Fett? Unless it means, like, Luke's going to come and help in the battle. But overall, I still really enjoyed episode 6 of this show, and it got me really excited for the finale. Excited to see how they would tie all of these various plot lines together, with the Grogu plotline, the Mando plotline, the Boba Fett stuff, the Pikes, the flashbacks, the Tusken Raiders, everything. I was very excited to see how that would all come together. And I will say, the finale did not disappoint. It did a really good job, if you ask me, of tying together all of these plot lines in a very well-done manner. However, I had some issues. But first, let me talk about the positives. So, I'm not going to go through the whole order of events. I just want to get to the meat of this. We get to see Mando and Boba flying in on jetpacks, shooting down guys together. That was so, so cool. When Mando and Boba came in on the jetpacks, coolest moment. And then you get this awesome fight scene with Mando and Boba back-to-back shooting all these dudes. So, so cool. And then you get not one but two showdowns with Boba Fett and Cad Bane. So cool. And then, of course, the highlight of the episode. Boba Fett comes in riding a Rancor. Every kid's dreams right there. Boba Fett riding Rancor. Who would have thought we would ever see that? I was a bit disappointed. I thought he was going to go get the Slave One, or the Fire Spray. But regardless, it was so cool seeing Boba Fett ride a Rancor. Just so, so, so cool. So cool. And then you get these droidicas, like these big droidica things coming in. Which was interesting. I felt like that was the one part that kind of dragged for me. It's like, okay, we get it. They have force fields. Stop shooting at them and do something inventive. Oh, we're just going to keep shooting? Okay. It's kind of like when you see in Hulk movies, or they're just shooting at Hulk like machine guns. It's like, guys, have you not figured out that's going to do nothing? Like, come on here, fellas. But regardless, it was still a really cool, action-packed episode. The only downside was, I think, whenever it would cut back to the mods, I got a little bored, not gonna lie. And I was really bored the first time I watched it, but then rewatching it again, I enjoyed it a bit more with my expectations properly set. I really enjoyed this. And then I liked how the focus was back on Boba Fett. It was his story again, which was great. And then we get the people of Freetown coming in, which was really cool. And you have all these cool parts coming together. But it felt like something was missing, and I think what would have been cooler is if you had the Tusken Raiders all come in. So, because it sort of felt like war. They kept saying, it's a war coming, it's a war coming. But it was just Boba and like 10 of his buddies. Kind of underwhelming. I would have liked if maybe you see a scene in the flashbacks episodes where Boba's part of this one Tusken tribe, but they form alliances with these other Tusken tribes. And so maybe when he's like, I'm going for help, he goes and he comes back with the Rancor, and with him, an army of Tusken Raiders. Because then that would pay off the flashback storyline, because we don't really get much payoff there. So you get the Tuskens in here, and you have Tusken Raiders versus the Pikes, and then you have these droidekas that come in, and they're fighting those, and with the gaffy sticks, maybe they can help break them down. And I did love how Mando ultimately was fighting them, and then the Rancor just tore them apart. It was so cool. And then I liked the little reunion with Mando and Grogu. That was a really great reunion. Very emotional, very well done. Just one cool moment after another, even if some stuff didn't make sense, like in the beginning when he's like, they're all positioned. Black Chrysanthemum's just standing in the middle of the street, and it's like, buddy, no, go hide on the roof with like a sniper or something. Like, come on, man. But it was still really cool, and I really loved that whole fight scene. I just think it would have been a little cooler if they had the Tusken Raiders come in and help out just a little bit in that final fight, because I feel like it would have tied everything back together in a nice little bow. Now, of course, the big culmination of this fight, you get Boba Fett versus Cad Bane once again. Cad Bane scares off the Rancor, and then after that we get some cool parts where the Rancor is acting like King Kong and everything, so that was cool. You get Boba Fett versus Cad Bane. And up till this point, the Cad Bane Western showdown scenes, like with the one with Cobb Vanth especially, my favorite parts. And so you get Boba versus Cad. And the dialogue between them was so well written, very well done on Jalen and Favreau's part. Seeing these two legends actually on screen together was really cool. And then Cad Bane shoots down Boba. And it's like, whoa! And he's just shooting Boba one after another.
My final lesson.
He's about to fire the final blow, and Boba Fett knocks him out, and he pulls out the gaffy stick, which, that was another moment where I'm like, this is kind of stupid. Where'd the gaffy stick come from? One second he has a jetpack, and all of a sudden, magic gaffy stick shows up in his hands. It's like, where did that thing come from? But regardless, again, that's nitpicky, and I don't want to do that. So, he pulls out the gaffy stick, he's fighting Cad Bane, and he kills him. And this was a great moment for several reasons. One, it established that, yes, Boba Fett tried to go straight, he can't. In his heart, he is a fighter. He wants to be a simple man, but in his heart, he is a fighter. Two, it brought in his training from the Tuskens, and that was really cool. And then it felt like, okay, Boba's back. Boba has changed him as a character, but he's still Boba Fett. And I really loved that. And I loved just the way that whole sequence was shot, where it would cut back, the crossfade to Boba. I love that stuff. It reminded me of when Thanos kills Gamora, not plot-wise, but just the way it was framed and everything, and it cuts back to his face. I really loved that part of the episode, and it was by far my favorite scene. Even though the rest of it was like much cooler, emotionally this was the best part of the show. And then you got a scene that kind of bothered me a little bit, where you have Fennec Shand, she kills all the crime bosses, and it was a cool scene, don't get me wrong. I'm like, shouldn't that have been Boba? Because here's the thing. Boba thinks that this random speed biker gang killed his family, the Tusken Raiders. So he goes and he kills all those guys. Well, it turns out that it was actually the Pikes that killed the Tuskens. Or specifically, like, the main Pike. And then he's killed by Fennec Shand. So it's like Boba never got his revenge. Now, here's where I would have done that differently. What I would have done, so this is sort of change number 2. Besides, you got the Tusken Raiders joining the finale. And the one other thing that I think could have made it better is if you flat it with Cad Bane. Because Cad Bane comes in episode 6 out of 7. And it's like, oh, that's kind of sudden. Set him up earlier. So in episode 4, you have a flashback. Or episode 3, maybe. And you show some figure hiding after Boba Fett leaves the site of the dead Tuskens. You don't know who that figure is. And then, in this episode, Cad Bane says, I'm the one who killed your Tusken family. And so, you reveal that the Pikes had Cad Bane kill the Tuskens, and so now you have and that would have made sense why Boba Fett was like ready to shoot him right then and there, was so emotional when Fennec kind of calmed him down. And I think that would have been really cool, as it would have added an extra bit of drama between Boba and Cad, while also when Boba finally kills Cad, it would have had much more of an emotional relevance there, rather than to someone who hasn't watched Clone Wars being like, okay, you just killed the bad guy. This makes that more impactful, and I really wish that had happened. Again, just a minor tweak. Add in some Tusken Raiders and say that it was Cad Bane who killed Boba Fett's tribe, and I think you have yourselves a much stronger finale, even though it was a great finale, much, much stronger. And then my final minor gripe with this last few episodes is that they brought Baby Yoda back. And I know, of course, everyone was happy to see good old Grogu again. And I know I certainly enjoyed seeing Grogu in this series. But I felt like it may have undermined the ending of Mando Season 2, which I really, really loved. Where you see Mando give up Grogu to the Jedi. And that was the whole point of Season 2. And then you end this off, and Grogu's back with Mando. And so imagine you're watching Mando, you watch the finale of Season 2, you have this emotional goodbye moment. It's like, okay, Grogu's going to come back, he's going to guest star. He's not going to be with Mando forever, though. And then Season 3, Episode 1, he's with Mando forever. It's essentially, he went to Jedi University for a semester, and then came home. He's like, I'm going to drop out of college. I've learned some stuff. It's just college isn't my thing. So he comes back home, and it's like, it's kind of a letdown. But it makes sense when you think about it, because it makes sense in terms of where the sequels go and everything, why Grogu wouldn't be with Luke. However, I was hoping that Grogu would teach Luke a lesson in that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have attachments, because I would have loved if by the end, and maybe this will still happen, maybe I'm judging this too early, maybe this will be the entire point of Mando Season 3. But I'm hoping that somehow Grogu is both a Mando and a Jedi. Similar to what they've already foreshadowed, in that the person who held the Darksaber was both Mando and Jedi. So what would be really cool is if Grogu becomes a Jedi, is trained by Luke, but then he's also a Mandalorian. He's loyal to Din Djarin, and he can unite the two tribes. That would be a really cool story arc to go on, and it would teach Luke a lesson that I think he definitely needs to be taught. However, I don't know if they're going to go in this direction. I kind of feel like they're not going to. Like, Luke and Grogu is done. It's just Grogu and Mando. And I kind of want something else to happen with Grogu. I want him to have more... I want there to be more to him than just he's Mando's little buddy. So I'm hoping we get more of that in the future of the Mandalorian series. What I would have done is taken all the Luke Skywalker Grogu stuff, as great as it was, and just put it in Mandalorian. Have episode 5 and 6 of this show be the first 2 episodes of Mandalorian, and then maybe you could have even had Mandalorian Season 3 going on at the same time as this show, and you could have done that, and this episode 7 would be like a crossover, or just take all the Luke Skywalker stuff in episode 6 and bump that to the beginning of Mando. Because what was Grogu's purpose? Well, his purpose was to show up in the end and stop the Rancor. Well, Boba Fett could have done that. In fact, they set up that Boba Fett would do that in episode 3. So yeah, that was my final little gripe with the show. But other than that, this was a really solid show. I don't want to end on a negative note. This is a phenomenal show. 8 out of 10. While there are some issues that I've already mentioned, it's still a great show, and I would definitely recommend watching it. One thing I would love to see in the future is possibly a Season 2, or maybe the Mandalorian series could become about all these characters. So it could be called The Mandalorians, and it could be about Grogu being a Mando. It could be about Mando. It could be about Boba Fett. It could be about Bo-Katan and uniting the Mandalorians once again, which I think is definitely the arc they're leading to. And I think down the road with that and then the Ahsoka show, I think they're building towards a big movie with Thrawn as the bad guy, and you can maybe bring Luke into that as well and base it off the Thrawn trilogy. So that's really where I'm hoping they go with this. And in the end, I would love to see maybe Boba Fett become leader of the Mandalorians. I think that would be a really cool direction for this character. Now, one thing I forgot to discuss real quick is the ending of this show where he's like, we're not cut out for this. I'm wondering if that means that he wants to be just the sheriff of the town and not a crime boss, or if maybe he's going to leave it in the hands of Cobb Vanth, Or what I think will happen, he'll leave it in the hands of Fennec Shand and the others, and he'll go off and help Mando with his Mandalorian adventures. That's what I'm thinking will happen, but only time will tell. With that said, I'm Jack Disney. I'll see you next time, and may the Force be with you.